Hey everybody, welcome to the Video Game Break Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Sardella. We're here live at Seattle Retro Gaming Expo and on a stage for the first time, which is kind of fancy.
Live.
Live and in 4K.
Yeah.
I have with me guest Robbie Zinchak of 8-Bit MMO. If you haven't played that game, 8-Bit MMO is awesome. You should go play it.
It's pretty much amazing.
And you have to say that.
Yep.
But he's correct.
I'm legally obligated to do so.
By your own law.
By me.
By you.
Yep.
We also have Ty Kelly with us.
Hey.
And you work at Ouya, but you also are writing a book and write for Edge Magazine and do a million other things.
I do lots of different things, yeah. And
You
I do game design, apparently, and I pretend to be that guy. And
Wait, apparently? Do you not?
well, so they tell me.
Okay.
Yeah, I pretty much sit in my room and write things.
By the way, we had an idea to do a game jam together last night.
Yeah, we were going to do a 10-minute long game jam, text adventure games only.
Ooh.
Interactive fiction.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Are you down?
I hate that stuff.
Well, it's only 10 minutes long.
It's only 10 minutes you have to do it. Okay, well, let's get into it. What we're going to do is normally we do 3 stages, Hyper, Turbo, and Super. You guys remember to say the words?
Hyper.
But we're not doing that today. We're doing retro. So retro stages. There you go.
Nice.
So the first retro stage is going to be a question that's on my phone. All right, let's go. What are some qualities of retro games that you'd like to see in more big budget titles? Like what's something that has been done in the past that you really dig, whether it be gameplay, just something about an old school game that you don't think is being done in some of the AAA titles and the big titles. Who wants to start?
All right, I'll go. So one of the things that I really like about retro games is the way that they're able to really overcome kind of the technical limitations. A lot of the old kind of retro games, they had high degrees of kind of tips and tricks that they had to learn the hard way. I know, for instance, on some platforms, you could only render 8 sprites at a time.
Yep.
And so in order to render 15, you would render a certain subset of sprites, like you'd render 8 sprites, and then the next frame you render 7 other sprites.
Yeah.
And so you'd get this ever so slight flicker, but you wouldn't be able to really tell. And it's just these creative problem-solving solutions that people used to come up with all the time in that era that, in modern AAA, you don't kind of see that level.
The resourcefulness of it.
Yeah, the resourcefulness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tyke, what do you think?
For me, it's more... So the thing I associate a lot with older periods of game development is how much more experimental they were. These days, it felt, for example, I was watching all the E3 coverage a few weeks back, right? And it's fun, and it's cool, and it's amazing, and it's graphics, and it's whoa! But one of the things that really strikes me about a lot of those kinds of games is how mechanically repetitive they're becoming, of each other, and how much they don't really seem to want to do very much, and how even if they are trying to be, innovative, they're often doing so in kind of tangential and small ways and stuff like that. Whereas the thing with the retro era, was it just the perception of risk was never that strong. And so you just got a lot of harebrained people coming in and just trying some stuff, and a lot of it was rubbish, but a lot of it was cool, and it actually discovered a lot of the stuff that we're sort of replaying today.
Right.
So that's my preference. That's what
trying stuff and just trying it for the sake of trying it.
And being very we're just going to try a thing for a little while, and we're going to stick some stuff together and see does it work.
Well, the problem is that you have these big studios, like you said, and they have all this risk. Yep. And they're spending more and more money on each title.
Right.
And we're talking about basically big budget titles. And they're like, well, we need to get a return on our investment.
Right.
And then it's about a return on investment. It's not about trying something new.
Yeah. It's like the way blockbuster movies they're very formulaic these days because the investment that's involved is so heavy that they're like, we have to have everything right. Oh my God! So we need a hero and we need a damsel in distress moment and we need this, and it's almost like cranking a handle until we have a movie, and then we foist it out into the world. And big video games to me feel a lot like that these days.
Well, it sounds like experimental and being resourceful, both those things we can't put into big budget titles. It feels like those are something from a bygone era. I can't see how we could shoehorn that in or get people to be that way.
Well, I have a lot of faith in the next generation of indies, like the Robbies of this world, who are trying to do exactly that. They're using a lot of kind of new tools like Unity and Game Maker and Twine and whatever to make games inexpensively and then figure out how to distribute them on phones and tablets and PCs and whatever, And so there's a real resurgence going on. Yeah. It's great.
For indies, a lot of the challenge now is not necessarily the technical challenge. It's more of a resource challenge of, you have a very small team, and it's a question of, how are you able to kind of maximize that time.
Right.
Well, so say something for you, like Robbie, you're doing developing games. Say you get a real big hit. Okay, you have a Braid all of a sudden.
Sure.
Now, as the more money gets pumped into it, though, does it all funnel back into that same type of system? Like now you have all this huge team, and you're becoming essentially, you know, a big AAA studio, and then is it harder to stay and do that thing? That's the circle, right?
Yeah. Well, there's also something to be said for when you've got a team building up a skill set and expertise in a particular genre or engine or whatever that is. And when you switch from genre to engine or to whatever, you lose a bit of that skill. You have to kind of reset it and start afresh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and also you tend to get more of a need for specialists. So I know a lot of indies, for example, who have put together, let's say, like a one-man game, and it took them like 2.5 years, and it nearly broke them, but they managed to do it, and they were successful, and like, great, happy days. But then for their next thing, they want to do something that's sort of bigger, they want to do something that's kind of, they don't want to do the same game kind of again, and they also don't want to, like, work, not like work hard, but they don't want to work so exhaustively on every single part of it all over again. So they naturally try and figure out, can I get an artist? Because I'm terrible at art. Can I get a voice recording guy? Can I get another programmer who maybe knows how to do network code? Because I don't know how, and stuff like that. You know?
Yeah.
And so it is just natural. Like over time, they need to aggregate some amount of folk.
Well, the good news is, like you alluded to, it's such an indie time right now, and time for indies to do well. And so I think a lot of the experimentation is happening in that space, but that space is actually a lot bigger.
Right.
And there's a bigger audience for it, and they're reaching new platforms, obviously with ID at Xbox and PlayStation's great support of indie titles, like you mentioned, Entwine. So it's a good time for experimentation. So that'll come anyways, even if the AAA guys don't want to worry about the return on investment. All right, let's do stage 2.
Retro Stage 2. Retro Stage 2.
Okay, this second question is, with the popularity of indie games, like we just mentioned, in quotes, going retro, do you think the movement towards 8 and 16-bit styles, will that expire? The idea of, hey, now let's make a game that looks like Nintendo or Super Nintendo or whatever, is that something that's going to be a fad in a way, or do you think people will keep using that style? I mean, it's really popular now with like Nidhogg looking like Commodore 64. It's a great game, by the way. But I'm just wondering if that's something that we will, with virtual reality and other things at some point in the future, is that something where we like go back, oh, well, we're not going to do that again?
So if it is, I think it's on a very long curve. It's not just because retro is kind of cool in a sort of, hey, look, you know, that character on a T-shirt sort of way. There's sort of real tangible reasons why developers still, particularly indies, kind of work in that way. A lot of it's to do with the scalability of art. Like if you're just one, I mean, you've got this with 8-bit, right?
Yep.
You cannot sit there and create loads of custom characters and stuff. You needed to create a tool that would allow you to create thousands of variations, and they all have a kind of a charming look as a result. But it's primarily driven as much by sort of resource constraints, right?
But what happens when those tools get better then? Not to be devil's advocate.
That only kind of happens so far. Like there's still a massive amount of manual work involved whenever you try and get to more detailed art or more custom art, or it exponentially grows to huge amounts very quickly. So a lot of it's that. A lot of it's just like, well, I'm one guy and I'm going to make a game, and therefore I'm going to use like little 8x8 sprites because that's the simplest thing I can work with, and that's what I'm going to start with. And then that lends itself to a certain style kind of over time. And I don't see that, as long as there's like one guys out there trying to make games, I don't see that going away anytime soon.
It's just almost part of the process at that point then.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Robbie, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just to add to that, for me, it's kind of like, you know, saying, oh, when are people going to get tired of pixels? I'd say, when are people going to get tired of polygons? You know, it's just as valid of a, you know, art style or art technique as, you know, anything else.
So never, basically. Both of the answers are never.
Never.
I mean,
Pixels forever, man.
Pixels forever. Actually, that should be a band name or something.
Yeah.
Pixels forever. Anyone want to take that? Oh my goodness, that's awesome.
We're going to start a band, the three of us.
Right.
None of us will be able to play any
We're going to
instruments.
become folk musicians.
Yeah.
He didn't even want to do a game jam with us earlier. I don't think we're going to start a band.
I was going to make an analogy to folk, actually. That it's a little bit like the way that there's always a market for music made by a guy with a sort of a simple guitar, because that's the simplest, most basic way that people can start making music, and it's a similar thing. So there'll be innovations within that sort of style group and stuff like that. But
points.
Okay. 5 points.
5 points. That's awesome. That's a great analogy.
Thank you.
You got to pick up a guitar and make a song, and that's your tools.
Right.
Great. I love it. Perfect answer. Correct answer. And points. We have only one stage left. This is a short. It's gonna be kind of a
this is
short
the
podcast.
shortest
We're
podcast
flying.
in the world.
We can just wing it after that.
We're going to.
But I thought we'd just go through a couple because we're at the Retro Gaming Expo. Talk about retro game memories.
Okay.
And hopefully some of you have some. Both of you have some ready.
I've never
prepared?
played a video game in my life.
What?
And the segment is now
This is
over.
shocking.
Well, Robbie, I'm starting with you.
All
Video
right.
game memory, retro. We'll call retro anything before PlayStation or something. I
Sure,
don't know.
sure. So
Old school.
I remember growing up, we had a NES, and I'd remember on waking up Saturday mornings, watching first off the Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon, which
Whoa.
at the time was basically like the Game of Thrones of my childhood. Like it was amazing.
But no one died.
it does
Horrible
not,
deaths.
It does not hold up. But at the time, it was amazing.
Yeah.
And then I would turn on my NES and I play like Zelda, the classic Zelda and the gold cartridge, and
Which you were just playing in the free play room.
which I was just playing, and I think it was my first time playing that maybe since then. Like, it's been a long time. It's been an unfortunately long time. I could not find, like, the dungeons or the Master Sword. Like, I'm trying to find, like, all this stuff. I'm like, and you know what it is when I was playing classic Zelda, there was that fold-out map.
Oh, yeah.
And I had I would get the fold-out map, and I'd like look at the screen, like figure out where I was. And for me, it almost looked like that map had been through like physical adventures, because it was through just being used all the time. It was all
Like catch
tattered
up on
up,
it.
and
Yeah,
it
yeah.
looked
Totally.
like it had been through actual adventures. Like,
Yeah. Torn and ripped.
torn and ripped, just faded at the edges.
That was such a great instruction book. I remember
Oh,
because all the
yeah.
little anime in it, or the little manga and stuff, and
Yeah.
oh my goodness. And that's one thing I missed, by the way, just to jump in. The whole instruction book thing. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
now it's pretty much just a sheet, or
If that.
If that.
I mean, digital download.
Digital download, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just thought there was something really awesome about that. And yeah, it was your companion to the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, they still sell like walkthrough Prima guides and stuff, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
Zelda, awesome memory. Robbie, Tig.
So I was thinking about this yesterday, and I realized that 21 years ago, when I was 19, I used to work in a game store. I used to sell Super Nintendo cartridges, Sega. Well, we called them Sega Mega Drive, but that was Britain. But it was
Oh,
the
yeah,
same thing as
right.
Genesis. Amiga games, PC games of all sorts. And it's so weird. Like, I took a quick look around at the hall there and seeing like lots of old like SNES carts and stuff for sale. And I'm thinking to myself, I was there the first time around when these things cost like a fortune, and
Yeah.
yet you had like loads of kids pretty much saving up all their pocket money and stealing and whatever, and coming up and buying like everything and everything from Mario All Stars all the way through to whatever. But also, we've talked about this before, because I grew up in the sort of British tradition. All my kind of retro memories are actually more to do with things like Sinclair Spectrum games and Commodore 64 games, and I'm also like that old. So,
I am too.
things like, you guys maybe never heard of games like Manic Miner, for example, but I played the hell out of it. Oh man, you're talking about technical brilliance in the retro sort of sphere. So in the Sinclair Spectrum days, it was something like you could only play 7 colors at any one time, and there was a huge problem with color masking from sprite to sprite all over the place, and it had 48K. And a lot of those kind of old school British developers who are now running big studios all around the world and stuff pretty much got their start there, coding like assembler, like directly like the hardcore of the hardcore of the hardcore,
I remember
and making
assembler.
massive games like Jet Set Willy, which is like this 200-room like platformer that you could sort of play forever, and was actually broken, which nobody knew for ages. But so the legend goes that the last room, there's actually a bug in it, and you couldn't finish it.
I heard that. I was reading that retro magazine, and they were
Yeah.
like, and you can't beat
You
that
can't
game.
finish it. Yeah, they did produce like an updated version later on, which was fixed. But yeah, there's like thousands of copies of it out there. It's like the game that's intentionally uncompletable.
Which speaks to how many people finish actual games.
Oh yeah, well yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Which is a whole other discussion.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But
That's-
like a lot of that's my kind of retro sort of time is all of that sort of stuff. The very first game I ever played is the Hobbit text adventure.
What? I didn't know that happened.
Yeah, Sinclair Spectrum. Hobbit, it was like I was 9 years old. It was one of these, it was so underpowered that it had to literally draw the whole scene out, like with a pixel kind of going around like that, and then fill it in, and then it would present the text, and then it would say, what do you want to do? And you're like, go north. And then it would start drawing it all over again.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff.
Oh, nice.
So that's like 1984 or something. More, a retroer than that.
That's the retroists. Yeah, no, I remember drawing maps. I mean, I definitely, I'm in a huge text adventure kick right now. I was telling you guys.
yeah.
I'm working on a game,
Yeah.
which is real fun. And
Are
it's,
you working in Twine or something?
what was that?
Is it Twine that you're using to make your game?
No, I'm using Quest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And by the way, if anybody wants to make a text adventure, it's great because it's called Quest, Quest, I think, I'm pretty sure. And it's browser-based as well as downloadable. But you can do things like I was telling you last night. You can call up sounds and images within the text adventure. So in the game I have that I'm making, there's an Earthbound cartridge. And when you click look at, it shows a picture of the Earthbound cartridge. And then you can do even things like you can call YouTube videos. Which I thought was really cool. Yeah.
Right.
So it's like a modern version of the text adventure.
Oh, you could build like a series. Do you remember ARGs?
No.
Like about 10, 15 years ago, what were they called? Augmented reality games or alternative
Oh,
reality
yeah,
games?
that, okay, art, yeah.
The whole, like, you dig around on websites looking for clues and
Oh,
puzzles.
like VRML.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Yeah. Games like I Love Bees and stuff like that. Like.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe you could make some Argy stuff.
Okay, I'll do that too.
All right.
So I think that Text Adventures is always something that I loved in the past, and I grew up with Nintendo. I know you didn't have that, but that was part of it. That was one side, the console side. But a huge part of the very beginning was computers.
PCs,
It was
yeah.
old PCs. It was my cousin and his uncle. My uncle, his dad. With the warehouse or the warehouse digs where you go through and just like there's like a lot sale,
Right.
And you're like, oh, I guess we'll get that section of the lot for
Right.
so much money. And we just go home with all this stuff and just see how we can make it work,
Yeah.
Which kind of goes to that experimentation side of it,
Do you
right?
remember, did you ever buy any of the big box games that would come on like 18 floppies?
Oh, yeah.
And say floppy number 16 would like be broken. Or,
And you're like,
you'd be
no,
totally
I was just about to
screaming.
install it.
And you'd be going back to the shop with the guy and yelling at him, going, floppy 16, and he would put it in his disk drive and it would totally work.
Wait, I think now we're getting to your story. Because that was like, I'm with you, and then you're like, and remember then this part you yelled at the shopkeeper?
But yeah, I was the shopkeeper as well.
Okay, yeah, that was you. I remember all that. And I remember, 5 1/4 inch and all those different disk drives. But Commodore 64 was huge for me.
Yeah.
That's why when I saw some games here, which was awesome to see, I saw those plastic sheet ones. Remember, it was just one plastic sheet, and the 5 1/4 inch disc was inside, and that's it. You just got that.
Yeah.
But it was usually like a budget title, so it was like $5 or $10.
Yeah. In Britain, it was cassette tapes.
Oh yeah,
Like
cassette
lots
tapes,
and
yeah.
lots of little cassette tapes.
Yeah.
And now everybody listening to the podcast is saying, "What's happening? I don't get it."
Now, what the hell is a cassette tape?
Yeah. But yeah, that really was a big deal. And I think going back to the experimentation thing, like there was so many different things happening on Commodore. I just felt like whether it be like a math game or a sci-fi game
Right.
or a role-playing game, I didn't know what the next game was going to be.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys had this, but we had on the 5 1/4 inches, we had the one where we just shared everything. So we get like a disc. It's like old school torrenting, right? So we'd
Right.
have the disc, the floppy disk, and it was from my friend. And on the top it said like a bunch of games, but it was maybe most of those and maybe some other ones.
Right.
And you just put it in. And the magic though, right? To put it in going like, load, quote, $quote, comma,
Yep.
8.
Right.
That would do the directory. And you do the directory and be like, what is on this?
Right.
But and never, some wouldn't work. Like at some point,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like 4 out of the 5 would work. Or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So for me, that was a big thing.
Yeah.
That's how I learned programming. Actually, I was had a TI-94 4A, and we would get these books from the library. Like 90 basic programs or whatever, and it would be for a different version of basic. So
Right.
you'd have to like bring it home and like figure out like, okay, well this command is supposed to map to this
Right.
command, and then kind of like figure out how
Reverse engineer.
Yeah, reverse engineer it, like understand the program, and then type it all in, and then save it to a cassette tape when you're
Yep.
done.
Yep.
So
People don't know nothing about typing code in from a magazine or a book.
No,
Because
no.
that is some crazy stuff.
It really is. It's similarly, Sinclair User magazine, which I used to get when I was like 12 years old. I had my Sinclair Spectrum and stuff. And that was the same. They would publish like full working, buggy, but nonetheless working kind of games. And, you'd sort of spend hours going. Because the Spectrum had these weird rubbery keys, which also, it was actually quite an odd computer. It was small. It had little weird rubbery keys that had, the commands were actually, if you like, attached. I'm trying to explain this. It's so weird.
And I think you tried to explain to me once, and I was like, I don't get how that would look.
So all of the keys all had all the various commands on them, right? And so the cursors would sort of flip back and forth. That was it. The cursors would flip back and forth in certain modes. So you'd push like P at a certain time, and it would write print, or you'd hold like function P or something like that, and it would do something else. And so it was actually a pretty good way to learn if you like, the steps of code without trying to remember how you spelled everything or that kind of thing. But it was pretty confusing as well. So,
Cool. Yeah, I remember having Commodore 64, or maybe it was just like basic stuff for PC, you know. And in the back of the magazine, it's like, here's the last 5 or 10 pages was code, and I did it. I put that stuff in.
Yeah.
And like you said, not for a very good game.
Yeah.
It's like,
Because at the time, it's not like there's an internet you could just go and like download some new stuff on. You had to
No. Not
manually
even,
do
it
it
wasn't
yourself.
even BBSs at that point. It was just,
No.
you know. My dad was actually a huge fan of this sort of stuff because he was like in his 40s and computers could kind of happened while he was an adult and stuff. But he got really into it. He actually got way more into it than I did for a while. He was just sort of like, oh, it's the new magazine, and he'd yoink it. And then he would sit there like till 3 a.m. coding out like Columbus Adventures or like some Ghostbusters game or whatever. And then he'd like make
Ghostbusters
me
sounds
play it.
pretty cool, actually.
Yeah. It was all sorts.
I'm sure it was 100% licensed. Yeah.
This was back in the day.
Things were so shady back then.
Ghost
Not shady,
Blaster.
but yeah. That's kind of an interesting topic on how, like, you know, now everything's very. I mean, copyright existed, you know, back then, but it's just like it
nobody
feels
cared.
like maybe because it was so brand new, that people were just trying stuff.
Yeah, it was such a
okay.
small business, like compared to where it is today, and it just wouldn't. I mean, you're not talking about the times when it's big shareholder-driven corporations and all of the stuff that kind of goes in
Right.
there. You're talking about, EA in the 1980s was like at one point it was a couple of guys in a basement, printing discs and stuff, and then they hire a couple of people and they hire a couple of people and blah 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 blah, and then 25 years later, they're worth trillions of dollars or
Yeah,
whatever,
and they're doing what we said earlier. They're having problems with maybe going back to those roots.
Right.
Because how do you go back from that? You can't go back. What is
You
that?
can never
you
go
can never go
return.
back. Is that Lost? Yeah, Lost. Remember?
We
You
have to go
back, Jack. Wait, not Jack. Was it Jack? Oh my goodness. Who is it?
This
Justin?
is the 4th section of the podcast.
We are lost.
What, are we talking about Lost?
We reenact
Oh, by the way, we
Lost.
start talking about Lost, I'm sure people will come over.
We are lost
Everybody.
on lost.
We have J.J. Abrams with us.
Do you remember the numbers? Remember the numbers?
Oh, no, I don't. I know 42 is one of them, right?
Yeah.
15, 16.
Yeah.
There's single digits and there's 15, 16, and something,
Right.
something, and then 42.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Do you know them?
Yes.
Go ahead, say them.
4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42.
Good
I
job.
don't know why I know that.
Because you have to type it in a computer every hour.
I do.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Wait,
By
you're
the way, just
Desmond.
give me a minute.
So we have Desmond / J.J. Abrams with us today.
Right.
By the way, I heard they might do a second season, or I mean, not a second season, a reboot of the whole thing. I don't think it was like, 5 seasons or something?
like even further
Justin's
lost?
giving a grimacing look at that.
That's an accurate reaction to that.
It
that
is,
thought.
it is,
Like,
it is. I just thought I'd bring that up because we're talking about Lost.
Right.
Well, I guess
It'll be
you guys,
called Found.
it's a companion.
Right.
Do you guys have any other video game, old school stuff you want to talk about, topics? Or if not, we can just shut her down. That's all I had prepared.
We've seriously been only talking 25 minutes. We
We're
must have
running.
more.
We're running
This is the
fast.
fastest podcast ever.
I think we
Fast,
all had
fast.
caffeine first,
Yeah. Maybe.
and we're just like flying.
Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe.
Let me think of another topic.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah, please.
Why are you into retro games?
Why am I into retro games? Well, it's really easy, and I've answered it before. It's because I started that way, so it really feels nostalgic for me. You know, it has that one little thing that kind of talks to my insides. It says, "Hey, games! Remember when we found it like unbelievable and full of hope and promise?" I feel like that's why I do it. It's not like the games are doomed and they're awesome today, but it's just that one little nostalgia thing. I think you know.
It's like a paean to your youth. It's like,
Yeah.
you remember when I was full of like possibility and stuff?
Remember before you were dead inside, Carlos?
Before I was bitter and old.
No, but with our site and everything, I love being the opposite of that because there's a lot of video game journalism that's totally jaded.
Right.
And like, oh yeah, there's another game coming out. Great. I heard it only has like, it's 8 hours of gameplay, blah, blah.
Right.
If anything, I try to tap into that thing you just said with retro games, but also just with modern games because it's video games. Like, it's awesome. I think people need to remember that more sometimes.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Especially the suits. But I will say that that's kind of a question I was going to ask. I think we asked it before on the podcast, but games were amazing to us because we were young,
Yes.
right? And a lot of the time people talk about, I don't know if we mentioned it on our show, I think we did, that like their fondest memories are from when they were young playing games. Like, can we have modern games memories, 3 S's, and have that same feeling that we had when we played Legend of Zelda? Is that possible?
I don't think so. But it doesn't necessarily. That doesn't mean that oh, that's it. Games are done for me, kind of thing. It's more. I can't get away from the fact that I do have all of this like context that I've built up in my head over, whatever, 35 years of playing games of one sort or another. It informs all my choices. It makes me sort of kind of reach for different kinds of games that I'd like to play now. I have different. I'm an adult supposedly at this point, so I sort of have different tastes compared to where I used to be. I'm very intolerant of certain kinds of games, whereas I see like 20-year-olds going, "Oh, it's amazing," and I'm like, "Oh, I couldn't care less," And that's just because I feel like I've done these things like 25 times before, right? That kind of thing. But that doesn't mean there's no wonder to be had in games. It's just it's different, right? When you're 40 years old, as apparently I am, when you're 40 years old, you're kind of about other things, And so, for me, it's like I always look for games that are about where I'm at rather than
where you're at now,
where I used to be. Yeah.
But do you think even if one spoke to you now at 40, you could figure out that same feeling though? You know what I mean? I think we've answered it. I just remembered it was me and John Davison actually talking about it, and I think we decided that it wasn't possible to get that back because it was attached, like physically almost, to that being a child kind of thing.
So I want to disagree with both of you guys.
Okay, please.
I think that's, well, at least for me, it's totally off base. So, like, when I was playing the classic games, like Zelda especially, with kind of this huge world that you're exploring and it just seems limitless, like, I'm able to capture some of that feeling actually on 8-bit MMO. When I'm playing through that, I'm constantly seeing stuff that people are building. Like, we just got the new map system online, and the map basically hadn't been updated for like 6 months. And so we got it updated, and overnight basically could see all this new stuff, all this new player creations, all this cool stuff that's going on. And it's every time I find something new on that map, it's just like, wow, I didn't know people could physically do this. And it's got a little bit of that sense of like, I wrote the game, and even I don't understand the limits.
Yeah. So the creativity you're watching that they're doing is giving you that kind of feeling.
Yeah.
Do you think though that that's kind of more because you have a creator's perspective now?
It might be.
Because you're the one who knows how the nuts and bolts of it works, and so in a sense they're all playing your game, but in a sense they're all leading you to places that you never kind of thought of, and that's kind of wondrous in its own sort of way.
Yeah.
So the answer is everyone make your own game.
Well, everybody
and then you'll be able to get that feeling back.
Exactly. That's really the simplest thing to do.
It's the simplest thing to do.
Actually, yeah, maybe I was being a bit harsh earlier. I remember last year, for example, the game that I enjoyed more than any last year wasn't even a video game at all. It was the card game Cards Against Humanity.
Oh, yeah.
As a designer, I was super jealous of Max Temkin and all those guys because I was like, this is such the best idea. And I can't believe I never had that. I can't believe we hadn't invented this 100 years ago as a sort of a game. It's so easy, and yet it's actually genius, right? So yeah, there is. Yeah, I'm not as old and bitter as I sounded earlier. There is definitely kind of possibility for it. It's just I suppose I'm more I look harder than I used to.
Yeah.
You're becoming more optimistic while this podcast goes on. It's great.
The podcast is changing your life, is what you're saying.
It's changing.
Can we put that in quotes for the podcast?
The funny thing was the quote that Dylan used to say about "I was so much older then and I'm much younger now" or something like that.
I have noticed you mention your age quite a bit, and you're 40, and I'm 39, so I'm really kind of freaking out that maybe when I become 40, I'm going to be saying that I'm old a lot.
I realized about 4 weeks ago that I'm literally in the depths of my midlife crisis. I got onto Facebook and I said, "Facebook, I'm on my midlife crisis." And everybody went, "Ah."
Yeah, people laugh at it. That's nice.
I saw that. I saw that post and I saw everyone's reactions and I'm like, oh, he must be joking?
No, I don't think. Yeah,
no.
But that'll get into a whole other podcast. Let's not go there because that's
retro. It's about your midlife crisis.
Midlife crisis podcast. Let's do it. Well, that should be all the time I think we got. We did some retro memories. That was good. Yeah. Tig, you're writing a book.
I am writing a book.
And what's that about?
I'm writing a book which is provisionally titled Raw Game Design, and it's about game design as a formal separate skill is very hard for a lot of people to kind of get their head around. And a lot of the time it's because there's a lot of great literature out there about the thinking, about how to think about design and how to explore a design space and a possibility space and blah, 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 blah. But there's precious little information out there about how to take all that work and turn it into usable specs for say the rest of your dev team to understand what the hell is going on in your head. And as a designer I've kind of practiced for years essentially a very brutal form of kind of game design where I try and boil everything down to simple, straightforward instructional pieces for coders, artists, and all the rest of it to kind of work with, right? And I just realized I was talking to a publisher a while ago because I blog a lot, and we were talking about we'd do a book together of some sort, and they said to me, we kind of settled on this idea that I said there isn't, if you like, a template book out there for aspiring designers to learn how to do this and how to sort of, if you like, just learn how to write. Not so much kind of how to think, but how to express themselves, like in a way that will actually help everybody rather than writing giant design documents or essays or rants or kind of whatever. And so that's my book is about that. It's about a method for writing design rather than designing, so to speak.
That's cool. Yeah, like a reference.
Essentially, yeah. People have compared the idea a lot to like one of those like screenplay writing guides or whatever, where you sort of, if you like, they demystify a lot of the functional parts of what it is you do, and it kind of helps teach you the technique. And then from there, you can go on and be as imaginative as you like.
So is the title Video Game Development from a 40-year-old?
No, my midlife crisis in book form.
Now, what is it called?
It's called Raw Game Design.
Okay.
And it's going to be out next year.
Cool. Nice. Well, we'll be looking for it. And, of course, see your writing in Edge magazine, which I always get.
Actually, not anymore. My Edge column came to a close. But I am still ranting on TechCrunch, which I do from time to time.
Okay.
And I'm on my own blog and all that sort of stuff as well. So.
Yeah, your own blog is great, too, so check that out. Give it to everybody.
It's whatgamesare.com.
There you go. And Robbie, of course, people can play your 8-bit MMO, and they should. Yes. One of these people are on the stage right now who needs to play it a lot more. And I'm pretty excited to go back and jump in, so.
Oh, thanks.
8bitmmo.com.
Yes, we now own .com, which we did not always, and that was its own interesting situation of trying to bid against other people to get my own domain name.
And they were doing nothing with it, right? They were just sitting on it?
Essentially.
Yeah.
The original guy who owned it was super cool, but he went AWOL. And then a bunch of domain squatters came by.
Oh, jeez.
But now you can go to 8bitmmo.com or .net.
Ooh.
It's of your variety.
Yeah.
Hey, we like .net.
Choose your own adventure.
Choose your own .com adventure.
or .net. But it's great. It's free to play. It's a construction sandbox game. Build anything you want in a massive, persistent universe. It's awesome. Go check it out.
I love how you just gave that pitch to the camera. I had to call that out because that's so awesome.
Because I've already given both of you.
I know. We already know it. So you're like, listen, you guys at home.
At home.
Yeah. That's the only time
kids.
that anyone looked into the camera. It was just then. And that's going to look awesome. So 8bitmmo.com. And also videogamebreak.net. We're having the same problems. We have to bid on our .com. So, yeah. But we're embracing .net.
There's like about 1 billion new domain extensions coming out.
Oh, I know. .guru and
dot whatever, pretty
yeah.
much, and like la la
dot
la
giraffe.
So,
giraffe.
like, maybe just go
it's
for it.
limited only giraffe domain related issues only.
Yep.
They check.
They check.
Yeah.
Yep.
Some of them they do.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is
ruining.
weird.
They're ruining the internet.
And we're almost out of time. Okay, well, we're done anyhow. Robbie, Tig, awesome for you to be here. Thanks for being part of our first live podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's been fun.
I had to pick you two returning guests, awesome dudes, good friends.
Yeah.
So now maybe we'll have a pint, and we can and talk some more games.
All right.
So follow us on @VideoGameBreak on Twitter. You're on Twitter at
8-bit MMO.
And you're on Twitter at
Tide Tiger.
All right, and that's it. See you next time, and we'll do another live podcast very soon. Bye-bye.
Cool.